Rollins.
Here.
Commissioner Vogelsang.
Here.
Commissioner Wright.
Here.
Thank you.
Commissioners, our first regular item of business, the indemnification. We've received, and I'm sure you've seen it, another document that council needs to review further before he can opine on that. So we are going to need to defer that to another meeting. Are there any other changes to the agenda?
Madam Chairman, may I speak to that for a moment? Sure. I would like to suggest that in council's review of that they let known that I think that this indemnification agreement needs to be explored as to where it's going to go, who's going to have to sign it, and it should be more expansive than just the youth sports groups. And I think that I would also stress the fact that I consider the youth sports groups to be a part of a public-private partnership, and I think the city should address these sports groups just in that capacity, because without these sports groups, the city would have to be performing the same functions that these volunteer nonprofit organizations are having to perform. And I would like to address one part of that, and speaking specifically, the expanded nature of this whole arms agreement, I think goes into areas that could essentially bankrupt a nonprofit if there were litigation in a certain area. And I'll be happy to talk to Jake off the record about that, so that when they're looking at it, that they can take that in consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Hearing none. It's time for public requests, and Executive Director Harms has the floor.
Okay, we have two public requests. The first one, Dear Board of Commissioners, this is from the Soccer Association of Boca Raton. Dear Board of Commissioners, this letter is written on behalf of the Soccer Association of Boca Raton, Inc. with SABR with regard to proposed indemnification release and hold harmless agreement IA under consideration by the Greater Boca Raton Beach and Park District, referred to as the BPD. Requiring SABR to enter into this indemnification agreement raises grave concerns regarding SABR's continued ability to offer community and volunteer-based organized soccer sports programs and events. For decades, SABR has served thousands of families, children, parents, and grandparents seeking to make full use of the recreational facilities available in our area. In so doing, SABR has fostered a public-private partnership with the BPD, the City of Boca Raton, the School Board of Palm Beach County, and other organizations. SABR seeks to maintain this important community public-private partnership now and in the future. By way of background, on May 18, 2020, the BPD voted to enter into a new facilities use agreement for organizations and individuals outside the university, known as the FAU Agreement, with Florida Atlantic University concerning the so-called Glades soccer fields located on FAU's Boca Raton campus. On behalf of SABR, I provided remarks during public requests in support of the FAU Agreement. However, at the same meeting, Commissioner Ernst announced concerns regarding BPD's liability under the FAU agreement. As a result, even though the FAU agreement was essentially a renewal of a long-standing agreement between FAU and the BPD Commission voted to develop an indemnification agreement between BPD and users of the FAU facilities. SABR, over 4 decades serving our community. As many of you may be aware, since 1977, SABR as a nonprofit organization provides much-needed soccer-based recreational programs to the greater Boca Raton community. Having grown into one of the largest soccer clubs in Florida, SABR organizes and manages a variety of programs so players at all skill levels have an opportunity to play the game at the level that best suits each individual. Further, SABR strives to maximize the development of each player within each of its programs. This includes programs for youth, adults, and those in our community with disabilities. Among other things, BPD's mission is to provide athletic and recreational activities to the very same residents served by SABR. This represents the essence of SABR's public-private partnership with the BPD. SABR's concerns with the indemnification agreement. First and foremost, for decades, SABR has managed its events for the benefit and safety of the participants. SABR programs and activities have always been carried out in a careful and safe manner. Nothing in the IA addresses anything related to the safety or welfare of participants or residents of the BPD. Instead, the IA is focused on some potential undefined legal liability that could theoretically accrue to the BPD through the use of the facilities outlined in the FAU agreement. A review of the public record does not reflect any thoughtful discussion regarding if, how, or why the BPD is lacking legal liability protections, nor is there any indication of why, at this point in time, renewal of the FAU agreement raises new and different issues never contemplated in the past. Therefore, it appears that the IAA is nothing more than a solution in search of a problem. Assuming there is a demonstrated legal or policy-based need for the IA, which is currently proposed by the BPD, goes well beyond the four corners of the FAU agreement. Importantly, the stated need for the proposed IA is the entry into the new FAU agreement. Simply stated, a cursory review of the FAU agreement reflects that it is limited to the negligence of user or user's employees. In fact, the FAU agreement explicitly provides that nothing therein is intended to indemnify FAU from any liability or claim arising out of the negligent performance or failure of performance of FAU, or as a result of the negligence or failure of performance of any third party. Here, the BPD IA is attempting to do the opposite by requiring SABRE to release, indemnify, and hold harmless the BPD arising from or related to any and all activities or events without limitation conducted or performed by SABRE at the FAU facilities. SABRE is further required at its own expense to appear, defend, and pay all charges for attorneys chosen by the BPD for defense of the claims, and all costs and other expenses arising against the BPD in any such action. The IA does not stop there. The IA goes on to state that the BPD has the explicit right to sue SABRE for specific performance of its release, indemnification, and hold harmless obligations under the IA, and be able to obtain attorney's fees against SABRE if it is the prevailing party. The IA makes no mention of the fact that BPD enjoys sovereign immunity pursuant to section 768.28 of the Florida statutes. In conclusion, the IA places SABRE in an untenable, unreasonable, and unnecessary position. The IA does not reflect the long-standing public-private partnership that has benefited Greater Boca Raton community over several decades. Moreover, we believe the BPD should be actively fostering and supporting SABRE's programs, not erecting obstacles. There should be no dispute that these programs provide a valuable and needed public service to the residents of the Greater Boca Raton area, and that these SABRE programs are consistent with and in furtherance of the BPD's statutory defined mission, notwithstanding that the IA creates obstacles and seemingly reflects an attempt by some to shift significant burdens and responsibilities onto a not-for-profit community organization. As such, our board of directors holds that the IA should be categorically rejected by the BPD commissioners. Sincerely, Earl Stockoff, President. And another one from Raul Travieso, for pickleball. Commissioners, I am Raul Travieso, 1037 West Royal Palm Road, President of the Boca Raton Pickleball Club, Inc., and recently appointed by the USA Pickleball Association as the Southeast Florida District Ambassador. I wish to take this opportunity to request consideration by the district, in coordination with the city, to provide additional dedicated and lighted pickleball courts in order to meet the increased demand by our residents. Our club members and other residents are extremely grateful for the 4 courts at the El Rio Park. The courts are extremely busy during daytime hours as well as the early evening hours. Often there are over 30 players sharing playing time on those 4 courts. I've posted numerous pictures in our Greater Boca Raton Pickleball Facebook page to document the large crowds at the courts. Pickleball is no longer a retiree sport as young players are now emerging. 2 years ago, I chaired a Train the Trainer program with volunteers to teach over 80 Palm Beach County physical education teachers how to play the game. As a result, pickleball is being taught at the elementary, middle, and high schools throughout the county. Gated communities throughout Boca have pickleball complexes for their residents, and yet the rest of the citizens only have 4 daytime unlit courts to share. The county has converted 2 underutilized tennis courts to 6 pickleball courts at Okehili, Lake Lytle, John Prince Park, and 6 new courts are budgeted for next fiscal year at South County Park. A point in fact, many regional private communities advertise pickleball as their #1 amenity. We believe the district and the city should get in front of this ever-increasing demand for dedicated lighted pickleball courts. The 4 dedicated courts at El Rio are not enough to converting tennis courts at Patch Reef or the Swim and Racket Club would be the most economical and quick solution and would also provide revenue. Another possibility would be to build a pickleball complex at the Spanish River Athletic Park. And before the long-awaited golf course is developed, the abandoned tennis courts at Boca Chica could be resurfaced. Pickleball is a multi-generational lifetime sport, the game for everybody at every ability, and its growth is undeniable. Our group will be addressing the city at their next council workshop with the same request. We are available to discuss these issues further and to provide any additional assistance. Your attention and consideration of this matter will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Raul Travieso.
Brianna, are there any calls?
If anybody wants to raise their hand. There is one person with their hand up. Just a minute.
I think I see Greg Galanis.
Hi, guys.
Greg,
Hi,
State-
guys. Can you hear me?
State your name and address, please.
Greg Galanis, 1780 Southwest 22nd Ave. How is everybody today?
We're missing.
Good.
Just a quick question. It came up at the last meeting. We had not got a response from the city on the request to go it alone with their design approval. If someone could provide an update on that, I would appreciate it.
Brianne?
Sure, I've called Mike Wika to find out if he wants to talk about it. I've not heard anything back on the emails that I sent before, and I have not gotten a response to the phone calls and voicemails.
Do we have any legal recourse, Jacob, on the timeline and what the city committed to doing here?
Muted.
He's muted.
I'm sorry. May I respond, Madam Chair?
Please do, Jacob. Thank you.
Thank you to Mr. Galanis. The answer is that there are some options. I think that we've gone over the intergovernmental dispute process under Chapter 164, which requires first it would require this board to adopt a resolution initiating that process, followed by meetings between the executive director and the city manager, meetings between our council, our board, and the city council. The answer is there are some options. It would require a little bit of further discussion and process from our perspective. We'll continue to work with Brianne and advise the board accordingly to the extent that is a direction we're ultimately headed. But again, I'm not quite convinced that we're there yet. I think it's a matter of waiting to hear back from the city and following up given some of the circumstances that they've been dealing with and we've been dealing with.
Thank you, Jacob. My last comment here, guys, is time is not our friend. The closing of Boca Municipal is imminent in the near term, and I think it's incumbent on us to get a response one way or the other so we can decide legally how to proceed. Thank you for the update and appreciate any push that can be made on this. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Greg. I believe Mr. Starkov wanted to speak.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted, Earl. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. Clearly, you can tell from our email and our correspondence with you that we're very concerned about this issue. I certainly appreciate that you've had a development today that you haven't had a chance to review, and certainly we haven't had a chance to review it. So I understand that you're going to move this to another time. But even before that, I really want to speak not to the hard answers that we put in our concerns, but rather that we really have been partners with the city for over 40 years and the district, that we value this collaborative community service with defined roles that have worked for all these years. In fact, predating SABR and possibly the district, community youth sports groups have been in this community for at least 50 years, pretty much operating, to the best of my knowledge, under the documentation as well as arrangements and responsibilities that are in place. So we're very supportive of that. We really endear our partnership with the city, with the district, with Palm Beach County School Board, and FAU. And we want that to continue unabated. So what we're requesting is that at your subsequent discussions, I heard the chair say that there hasn't been time to review this. And that's what I'm requesting as well. That if there's going to be new documentation, particularly if it's going to have a foundational change in the relationship of all sports groups and beyond sports groups, users at the park. There's no difference per se between a field trip supervised by teachers from Palm Beach County schools or a private school as there is a sports group that has adults supervising children. So that we'd like to have, if you feel that conversation is necessary, to us, a matter that should be resolved first between staff and elected officials of the four organizations that come to mind, the district, the city, FAU, and the Palm Beach County School Board. Then, and gather input from interested parties, fine, such as us. We would participate in that conversation, but until something is done on a 20,000-foot strategic view so that there's one fair process applied to all users with responsibilities the same for all users, as well as the governmental authorities that provide the security to these facilities. We noted in our correspondence, there's nothing about the shift of liability that does anything to truly protect the public safety. So if there's going to be an all-encompassing process, please let's take the time. Everything's worked for 50 years. There's nothing imminent. There's no immediate dangers that fall outside of government guidelines, including the restart that the governor has allowed. We expect that the governor is going to allow Palm Beach County to enter phase 2. We've had a very active role and a great role with Mr. Calvert's team over athletics to be prepared for these with proper safeguards. And we'd like to get our players, our children, our adults, we have at least 1,000 of them that are ready to get back on the fields any day. And certainly we wouldn't want anything as cooped up as everybody has been to interfere with that. So if there's something that needs to be conveyed to the city or your other partners, we hope that you'll address our concerns even this evening to hopefully take our request that things stay in place until a longer view and greater study can be done. So this is done in an all-encompassing community partnership manner. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starkoff. We appreciate your input. Is there anyone else, Brianne, who would like to speak?
Just double check. You see anybody? No, nobody else.
Okay, at this time.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm
Would you-
sorry, this is John Fumero.
Hi, John. Nice
Hi
to-
there.
I saw you briefly on the screen there.
Yes, ma'am.
Give your name and your address for us, please, John.
Yes, ma'am. My name is John Fumero. I'm here as the legal counsel to Sabre. I'm at 6727 Royal Orchid Circle. I appreciate the opportunity to address the commission.
Please do right now. If the
Okay.
public request, this is the perfect time. You've got 3 minutes, John. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'll try to beat that. You've seen, I'm sure by now, the letter from Sabre.
Yes.
To put it simply in very complex legal terms, this is a pretty big deal having to do with the indemnification and home harmless agreement. It has really system-wide implications to, I think, every single user group, and for Sabre, certainly the community services that Sabre provides. I think most of us can agree that the relationship with Sabre over the years has been a true public-private partnership in that Sabre provides key mission elements to the residents of the greater Boca Raton area. You know, this indemnification agreement, just even a cursory review, you'll see that it's raising issues having to do with COVID-19. The insurance industry and coverage for COVID-19 is literally in a state of flux right now. Frankly, upon coverage renewal, I'm not sure there'll be any coverage for COVID-19. For a not-for-profit organization such as Sabre, this is a death knell, or potentially a death knell, if not handled properly. And so my only really statement to all of you is, please, let's proceed in a very careful fashion. Let's have a collaborative dialogue with all of the principals, BPD, the city, the school board, FAU. I am a glass is half full individual. I believe there are opportunities here to address some of the issues that have been raised, but we need to do so in a very stepwise, thoughtful fashion. If not, I'm just fearful of the implications, severe implications it will have for SABRE and the programs that are supported by SABRE. So just asking for the opportunity to work with you, your staff, and with the city attorney's office to come up with some workable solutions so we can continue on with the public-private partnership that we've enjoyed with you for decades. Thank you.
John, thank you very much. It's nice to put a name to the face, or a face to the name on the letter. So
I've known Mr. Ernst's kids, and my kids have grown up together, literally and figuratively. So I've known Craig for decades as well.
oh, well, that's wonderful. That's just great. Well, thank you so much for attending.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Ernst?
Yeah, I just want to thank both Earl and John. I got to say, I've known Earl through SABRE through many years, and I enjoy serving this board to fulfill the mission of our youth sport. So we will work through whatever needs to work through to make it happen. Something mutual for everything. But we are in a different world today, and that COVID-19 thing you mentioned, John, puts us all in flux. And there is really, that's a challenging issue for everyone. But
Yes, sir.
I think that we'll figure it all out one way or another. So rest assured, our overall goal for everyone is to serve the community in sports and rec. So.
Amen.
Thank you. Brianne, are there any other calls coming in?
Let me scroll through. I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay.
No.
Okay. At this time, public requests are now closed. It's time to approve the minutes of the regular virtual meeting that was held on May 18th, 2020.
So,
I hear a motion.
so moved.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Mrs. Wright. Is there any conversation? Anything that you need to discuss? Hearing none. Joanne, would you please do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now time for our regular business. We move to the CIP timeline and costs started on page 14. Brianne, would you like to start the conversation, please?
Sure, I can certainly start the conversation. At the last meeting, Melissa was directed to put together more of a timeline along with costs of some of the expected projects that we have going on. I think our focus needs to be on next year because that's the budget that we will be approving first. So in 2021, the list totals about 2.3, and that's where we were. I talked to the chair already because we were working on the agenda for our next meeting, and what I'd like to do, we still have not gotten a budget from the city. We don't anticipate having it before our next meeting. We should have it for our first meeting in July. However, we're also going to be required to set our tentative millage and first public hearing date by July 20th. So it doesn't give us a whole lot of opportunity to start talking about the budget. So what I want to do at the next meeting is have an initial conversation and put together some budgets with numbers that we had originally thought for the city and show the rollback at the current rates and put that out there with the CIP. As far as these projects go in this list, this is projects that Melissa has identified as priority projects for district facilities that we would run, as well as city projects that they had in their budget last year for this upcoming fiscal year. Those things could change. We don't know because we have not had an opportunity to review their budget. But we can certainly get into a discussion, answer questions. Melissa's obviously here to answer any of those questions about the projects, but I think the focus right now should be on next fiscal year and what we will work on. And I think we can get into a more detailed discussion next week on Monday when we have a preliminary budget in front of us.
Thank you, Brianne. Commissioners, I'd like to hear from you. The numbers and the projects are found on page 16 of your agenda packet, but is there anything else that you'd like to see added, subtracted, or do you have questions for Melissa? We'll start with you, Commissioner Engel.
You always start with me.
Well, you're in the upper left-hand corner of my screen.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm just looking through this. I don't see anything for the golf course.
That will be a separate line item in our budget. Originally, we had set aside 5 million for next fiscal year. I think that we will still be looking at that same availability of number. Now, if that's what we want to devote to golf, that's a conversation that we'll have to have as we start setting our budget.
Okay.
These are just the projects on our current facilities and things that we had already approved moving forward with.
Okay. Ocean Strand Development.
The tower, the Gumbo Limbo Tower is another one that's a separate line item because we have it as a separate line in our budget. So that's included. And I'll have a little update on that in my comment.
Okay. I think that was my only concern. I did talk to you about Ocean Strand.
Yes.
And I just wanted for the record to go through the timeline with you. We're going to talk about it on Monday with a view towards putting out an RFP. And we should have an RFP back by July. Am I correct? Or an RFP out? I'm sorry.
We would put it out in July. We would need about 45 days or so to get things back if that's the direction that everybody chose to go. Based on just a very basic phase 1 of a pedestrian style park at Ocean Strand. And so the goal, I think originally we had talked before this pandemic hit, was to get it open by September. We were obviously significantly impacted with how we could meet and look at facilities and continue working with city staff on it. So that did set us back some, but I think the goal would be to have it open by the end of this year, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to see it open, if at all possible. Maybe set a goal of before Thanksgiving.
Jacob,
Jacob,
did you have something?
you're muted.
You're on mute.
I do not have anything. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I saw your hand.
There is still a lot of concern in the community about commercial interests getting involved in Ocean Strand. And I think the best way to put that to rest once and for all is to start on the development and get that done as fast as humanly possible.
I'm ready for it.
Okay.
Can we put out an RFP for a design build for that
For those
area?
elements?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were going to have this as an agenda topic at the next meeting as Ocean Strand because the idea was a pedestrian-based park and very minimal. There would be no parking. It would just be adding a pedestrian gate, some walkways, no restrooms, some tables and benches, and just get it open for phase 1. And then we could look at in future years adding to it or continuing to develop it. But that would be the initial design build, yes. And you guys set aside $75,000, which I think would be sufficient to cover those things.
Okay,
And what's the 100,000 for?
That was just set aside for next fiscal because we had talked about phasing it in. So we just didn't know if you wanted to continue carrying a line item for that development.
And then, right, and for the following year. Can we make sure to put it, do we have to talk about it next time or can we just direct you to do an RFP for it now?
Jacob, do we need to have that as an agenda topic?
It should be a line item on the agenda, given the nature of that particular discussion. I would add it to the next agenda, and if that's the direction to the executive director, I'd make sure it's agendized for that purpose.
Could I start writing it and then they could review it at the next meeting to approve it?
Yes, that's an option.
Okay.
But the board would need to approve that RFP or RFQ.
They would have to approve it at the next meeting, but they could give me direction tonight to start writing it for Monday.
Yes.
Do we need a motion for that, Jacob?
If there's consensus, I think the executive director can take that consensus.
Commissioner?
I'd like to make a motion. Yeah. Make a motion to direct Brianne to start to write or to write the RFP for the design build for Ocean Strand development, including when we talk about walkways, I would much prefer pervious walkways, not concrete. It just increases the heat island effect and doesn't let water run and all that kind of stuff. So, and also as Florida friendly landscaping as much as possible. And then removing all the invasives, obviously.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Joanne, did you get that? Mrs. Wright did the motion and Mr. Engel seconded it.
And not to exceed $75,000.
In tables and benches.
Whatever
Elements, whatever park elements they want to put in.
yeah, that they can come up with. Yeah.
Is there any more discussion about having Brianne write up the RFP? Hearing none. Joanne, would
Maybe
you?
some solar shades. Remember we were going to do solar shades? That'd be a good place to put it in.
There's a lot of canopy over there. I don't know if we'll be able to make it
Oh,
happen.
that's true. Yeah. Stick them
Joanne,
really
do the
high
roll,
so they can get the
please.
sun.
Sure. Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, so Dan, you have your work cut out for you for Monday.
Gotta get busy.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Engel, that you?
No, that is insofar as the CIP schedule is concerned, that's all I have.
Okay. Mrs. Wright?
The miscellaneous roof projects, was that Gumbo Limbo roof?
Melissa's gonna talk to you on that.
Okay.
That was a separate one for this year, but next year is different.
Melissa?
Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. Might have to
I'll
mute.
just mute myself. Yeah.
Yeah, the miscellaneous roofs projects, I sent an email out with you guys, Aaron, to you guys also listing which roofs those were by year. What it was is the city's, Wayne Anderson with the city did a roof inspection of all the roofs. And basically it is for a preventative maintenance routine for the roofs. As the roofs have gotten older, roofs have a general life, and generally speaking, of anywhere from 25 to 30 years. And we have a number of buildings that are reaching those year milestones. And some of those, although they do not have continuous leaks, have had leaks, and we've gone and successfully repaired them. But this is a preventative maintenance program for slowly addressing the reefs throughout the parks that are either on parks that we own and or fund. And it was a plan put together by Municipal Services. So this particular one for the miscellaneous roofs, let's see, I have the information here, which roofs that addresses.
I didn't get an email on that.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing one either.
Maybe I was the only one who got
Send
it.
it again.
I did get a copy. I did get that notice.
I'll send it to you,
Okay.
Aaron.
Thank you.
That includes the Sugar Sand Park Fieldhouse, the Sugar Sand Park. Let me find the priorities page, make sure I'm giving you. I'll resend it to you.
Okay, that's fine.
But that's what it is. It's miscellaneous parks throughout, and I just didn't list them by roof and put the number down beside them all.
Okay.
She did a very detailed report. It was very good.
And then the only other thing I didn't see was the Patch Reef Community Center. I know when we were talking about how disrepair that is that on here anywhere?
That would have to be a separate line item that you guys could talk about as far as a project, because years ago we went out for a master plan. We'd have to go out for a new master plan on Patch Reef and redo the whole thing, but that would be one of the discussions we could have on Monday as far as how we want to allocate the additional money that we have left on projects.
Okay.
Right now, I've checked with city staff and the building is not leaking.
Okay.
And it's functioning. Of course, nobody's been inside except for staff because it hasn't been open to the public for the last few months, but it is not leaking right now.
But it's doing okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That was it.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes, Madam Chairman. So I'm looking at the I'm looking at the timeline on the budget. Is it in the coming fiscal year where we have the 5 million for the golf course design and construction?
That's what we had done in that projected budget that we did I think it was January, but it feels like 20 years ago right now.
Yeah. So in
Yes.
other words, that's in the next fiscal year, to expire September 2021. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and just looking at the items that Melissa had talked about, I did have some questions. I talked to Brianne about some of this. You know, it seems like every year we have IT upgrades and needs in a six-figure range, and it's listed throughout here. And I suppose that Melissa's talked to the city about that. And I know that there's software and the equipment is constantly changing to stay ahead of the hackers, but it just seemed to me at some point, you know, we should be at the point where we have preventive maintenance so we don't have to keep spending that amount of money. Any comment on that, Melissa?
Yeah. Let her unmute and she'll talk on it.
That number, the 169 one there, and again, I took that off of last year's request from the city.
But that also includes, just so you know,
I think it's $8,000 this upcoming
year to address security at the parks. And that's what they're budgeting in,
because their IT department is working with the security.
in order to come up with that. I actually have a meeting this coming Tuesday to go over the phase-in plan for that. So we're moving forward with a security plan for the parks, and that there is money allocated for that in the IT upgrades used.
Yeah, it was very difficult to hearing what Melissa said. I don't know whether it's just on my end, but you know, it was.
I
very-
couldn't hear either.
Goey.
Was it just
Okay.
my end that it was unclear?
No, everybody, I think everybody had difficulty.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a lot of feedback.
Go ahead.
Is that
That
better?
better? Can you hear me better?
You're echoey.
Can you hear me better now?
You're echoey.
Okay, let me just tell them. 80,000 of that money that's set aside for the next fiscal year and the next couple of fiscal years, 80,000 is for park security. And Melissa has a meeting coming up next week to kind of go over the phasing plan for how they're going to implement security features through the IT department in the parks.
All right. A couple other questions that I had. The batting cages at Sugar Sand Park. Did we just do last year? Was it just Patch Reef that we did the batting cages? I thought we had already done this with Little League.
Just a second. She's going to come use my computer.
Okay. And then I'll throw out a couple other things too. You know, as far as Gumbo Limbo AC and ductwork, then the boardwalk and beach crossovers at 200,000. What section of the boardwalk is that? And when was the last time it was repaired? And what kind of materials are we using on those boardwalks, Melissa?
Okay. First, the batting cages. When we talked about those year before last, we had decided to phase them in and do it over 3 years. So again, that's a project you can decide to move for. Any of these, this is just simply a working document of things that I knew that we had discussed before. So obviously you guys can make any adjustments you want. And you know, this time next year, I might not even recommend the same things that are on there. So this is simply recommendations where I took this project and took the money that Brianne had set aside based on the phasing in plan of the golf tournament and kind of the golf course, and kind of worked in where things could fit, and then based on safety, et cetera, the things that I outlined. So for the batting cages, we had completed the quad field batting cages at Sugar Sand Park year before last. This year we moved over and did the Patch Reef Park batting cages. And the plan for next year, originally when we went through this process, but it can be adjusted, was to do the dual fields at Sugar Sand Park for the upcoming year. So that's the batting cage. boardwalk and beach crossover. Bob, honestly, that's a placeholder right now. I've talked to Greg. The problem they're having is some of that boardwalk that was redone before. There's a traction problem because of the salt air, and it's wearing on those boards more, and it's causing a slip. So they've gone back and they've tried to put some non-slip paint on there to try to solve that problem. So there are some sections that we'll get more information on that next week, and they can ask more in-depth questions.
Well, I guess I was just wondering because I know we'd gone to using different materials like a plastic.
Yeah, like polywood or.
Yeah, is that what's slippery?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I think that was the question. But and just looking forward and be prepared for this answer when we next year, is that I'm just curious about what our ILA with Don Isridge requires us to do as far as the track. And I didn't realize that we were obligated to resurface the track and just something I'd like to know before next year. It doesn't have to be at a meeting, Melissa. You can just fill me in on that later if you want.
Absolutely. I'll take a look. I will let you know that has come in as a request. So I just have it there as a holder, but they have requested that. That does not mean we're obligated. I will absolutely do that research for you.
Well, I would, with their request, I would also suggest that given the activity over there on that campus, that they consider pitching in more than $25,000 toward the maintenance. Because now they've got, Verde over there, and then they have Boca Middle. And that's a lot of extra activity. And I think that there should be room in their sales tax that they got for construction to help us with the track.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think that'll cover me for now. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Mr. Ernst?
Madam Chair, thank you. As I look at the schedule, I guess a couple things. One is I think we'll know more as the city comes back with their plan and what they're doing. I'm also very sensitive to whatever we're going to set as a millage rate, because I would put some of these projects in, break fix, things that need to happen, so the IT upgrades, park security, top of the list. I think that's an environmental thing we need to do. If there are things that are kind of nice to have and could wait, I would probably push them off a little bit, only because I think we have to look at what are we actually going to set our millage rate and what is the city going to do. And I think we don't want to do it by ourselves. We need a little bit of thought process with them. And the big thought process of those line items that are not on this list being the Gumbo Limbo Tower, as well as the golf course. And so on the golf course front, I watched the city council's meeting related to the wildflower, and frankly, I was quite disappointed with the wildflower, as most of the city elected were very disappointed, because it highlighted the fact that the park simply isn't a priority, okay? And I suspect the golf course is not a priority either. And so that, I think we need to have a straight answer of what is a priority from the city and make sure that we're working towards it. And I would tell you, after seeing what's going on with COVID-19 and after all the other things that are going on with protests going on out there, honestly, they're good discussions, but they also highlight the need of how important our parks are, our beaches are, and we need to keep them going and we keep investing in them. And I honestly have no idea where they're going with the golf course out west. I have to go under the assumption that they're going to sell it, but I don't think we're going to get a straight answer from anyone about where we stand with the city for some time. So with that, I would encourage the executive director and yourself, if you like, to reach out to the city senior leadership group and say, we need to know where they stand. And if there is no straight answer from them, I'm kind of done with it. I think we should move forward with the east side and build out the east side as we designed, and with the exception being the one thing that we haven't talked about, and because of COVID, we were scheduled to have a needs assessment meeting, and we didn't have that needs assessment meeting. And that needs assessment meeting, if you go back to that, and I asked Mr. Calvert about what are the top things, just boil it down. I don't want to hear, all of the, mechanics of how it is and everything. I just want to know, if you had to give me 3 things that came out of our community, what do they want? Okay. And the 3 things that came out to me, and he'll probably correct me after this meeting, so I apologize to anyone I make wrong on it. But number 1 was more walking trails. Okay. We've talked about that, so I think we can do that. We can do that at Ocean Strand. We can do that at the golf course. Number 2, dog parks. There is a demand and a need for dog parks. And, and I've heard it from people out there that, they would like to see them lit, dog parks. Well, I was kind of thinking more about that and thinking, well, we already have lighted baseball fields. Why can't we have a dog park adjacent to one of our lighted fields or a lighted parking lot? So there's more lighting, and open something up more in our parks. So certainly if Ocean Strand comes forward, I'd like to be a little bit more of a dog friendly, parks, and I think that's something that we can kind of bake into the process as we go into things. But going back, I think that we need to just go forward with the east side of the golf course, and that will kind of force the issue of whatever happens with the west side. But you know what? Let's just move forward on the east side. And on that east side, that is, developing the driving range. I would modify that whole driving range so we could have a full walking trail around it. And if that means putting up some kind of fence and protection, along segments of it, I think it's very doable, and we should do it, and we should accommodate it, as well as over at the family-friendly side of it. And let's do it correctly. I know that we cut out a lot of things to accommodate what the city was looking for, but I do strongly feel that the golf course, the driving range, and the family-friendly short course that we've designed need to be lit. And so let's do those things correctly. Reserve the hotel site for something at a later date. Invite, design build on these things and move forward on them. So we're done with it, and that should be our number 1 priority. And let's not take on too many things, because we don't know how they're going to go. And so this list of things that we have here, I'd put them in kind of that category of kind of an A, B, C. A has to be done, so we need to do it. If it's C, like the pool resurfacing at the Spanish or the Swim and Racket Center, I've been over there several times, and it's not bad. Yeah, it'd be nice to redo it, but I think it's not immediate. That's $185,000. Given, we're spending taxpayer dollars in a tight environment, I'd look to kind of make sure we don't do things we don't need to do if it's just because it's a schedule. So that's my thoughts on it, but I think it will be more developed when Brianne has the opportunity to talk to some of the city and we get the full CIP schedule. But I would like to just recap for us going forward, our priority be the golf course, the east side. Ocean Strand, I think, we've committed to doing that, and it's easy to do. But don't forget, Ocean Strand, in my mind, is we have to engage the public. What do they want? And this was just a short-term thing. We need the next phase, as Brianne said, is something different. And the third thing being, let's bring in the elements of the needs assessment, and those top 2 being the dog parks and the walking trails. So that's my thought.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ernst. And to give you a little update, I have been in contact with Price Stasio and landscaping people and what have you for considering doing the east side. Wayne will get back to us by our next meeting because there are 3 elements: money, water, and time that all come into play, and the irrigation being a really big one. I guess I could bring it right now. I'd like to direct Brianne to either go to a workshop or a council meeting to bring this design approval to the forefront. Things got kind of muddied up back in February. So let's, if I can get a motion to ask Brianne to go to a city council meeting or a workshop and to ask for a timeline for the design approval from the city council.
If you need a motion, Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to make that motion to have Brianne address council and ask for approval of the design that we've submitted to them many months ago.
Well, I have one question.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Should we
ready.
have discussion? Oh, okay. Well, he just made a motion, so we're waiting for discussion? Or are we having discussion now?
I'd like a second if we could
I'll
get one.
second it.
Second.
No, give it to Steve.
Okay, Mr. Engel seconded, Joanne. Okay, Mrs. Wright, would you have a question?
Yeah, so Craig had mentioned the east side and incorporating some sort of trail walking paths into the short course side and the driving range side, which I think is a great idea due to the fact that not even the COVID thing where everybody wants to get outside and start walking, but the fact that nature trails were the #1 thing on the needs assessment, the absolute #1 thing. So I think it would be a really, and I believe I wanted those incorporated in the very beginning. I was told no. But is that something that we're going to ask Price Fazio to look at to kind of see if they can redesign it so that those can be incorporated into those sides?
Well,
Is that what you want, Craig? Is that something?
Yes.
I mean, because if we're asking the city, well, they're just doing the west side, but I think that it should, we should be asking Price Fazio to look at that if we're going to be starting on the east side. You know what I mean?
We have directed Price Fazio to stand down a few meetings ago, so we would have to have,
Right.
after we vote on this, to ask them to start some more design work.
Okay, so should we wait though until we hear an answer from the city first on the west side?
Well, Jacob, what is your thought on that?
Well, you can certainly ask the question. I think to your point, Madam Chair, I'm muted. To your point, Price Fazio has been directed to stand down, so presumably they're not going to do anything until this board revisits that discussion. I don't think there's anything that would stop Brianne from making that entree to the city and having that conversation. But she may want to come back after that with some feedback from the city, and then this board can revisit that process and decide how they want to direct Price Fazio.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have something?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Ernst.
So the short answer to Aaron is yes. It is a change, but also what I heard from the discussion from the city is this design build concept. And I'm not sure that what we're entering into with Price Fazio is design build. So I think that's a question we need to figure out. But what I'm saying is different is one, start with talking to this, we need a straight answer from the city of what's going on the west side. And even if we say, okay, we have your approval to do this, keep in mind what we went through with the eviction process. To me, if we have the approval to build the west side, we're gonna do it and we're not gonna be going back to them back and forth. It's gonna go through permitting, normal process. But if it's gonna be a process where every thing is gonna be scrutinized by everyone over there, I want nothing to do with the west side. I mean, I think it's a waste of time then, because we cannot go back and forth through the city elected and city government to ask them, for every tee box change. The design has been permitted, it's done. We need to do some modifications to incorporate the walking trails. And my point to that was Aaron brought up, and I agree wholeheartedly, was I was told no as well. But the more you think about the driving range, we have a berm there. Well, you should be able to have a walking trail going one side of it. And then, as you go on the other side of it, I get it. There's a whole issue with the train tracks and golf balls and you're hitting towards it, but we can safely protect that area with the proper netting and proper fencing. And we can create that nature trail in a circle, and that needs to be incorporated into it. What's different from the design that the Price Fazio team did, and when they first came to us, is this was a premium golf course, okay? And we scaled it back, but I think now's our chance to build this thing a little bit more the way we want it. The basic framework I like, and I think it's good, but there are components of it that should be put in there to make it a little bit more family friendly. Those trails are important, as well as, I don't know that we need a giant putting range, but we need to have some components of it. And then the other factor of it is this is not a blank check. It needs to be with that design build concept to kind of manage it down. So I'm not ready to say, Price Fazio, dust off your plans and get going. We're going to do this. There's some changes that need to happen. I don't know enough about design build concept, but I do like the idea of it. And I think if we're focused on the east side, we know we can control the east side with the normal process, which is going to be long anyway. But if the west side comes with, yeah, we like your plan, it's okay, but we have to let every contractor get signed off by the city, I don't think we can do this. And so that will come back to Jake to say, well, okay, you want us to do it, we're going to do it. So, transfer the rights of ownership over to the district so we can get this done. Otherwise, we're going to be doing like what they're doing with the Wildflower. And the Wildflower, was approved and designed in 2016. It was bought in 2007. And here we are in 2020. And I'm sorry, as a resident, it's embarrassing. But it's embarrassing because it simply was not a priority. And this golf course is simply not a priority for the city. It's a priority for us, and it's a priority for the golfers. So let's do and focus only on the things that we know we can control and we can work on. And I know we can do a great job on the east side, and I'd like to see us do it. So
I have one question for you, Craig. But we're paying them for the west side, right? We pay the money for it. So how would that work? You mean you would just say, here, you guys do what you want on the west side, but we're still paying for it?
No, ideally, we purchased it, but they kept the title intentionally. And because they kept the title intentionally, they have kind of kept control over it. So go back to I think back of the eviction process of the person who took over the maintenance facility and parked all the equipment there. Imagine now that you're going to have a contractor go on site and work on something. Today, it is difficult enough for Melissa to have any kind of construction work done on that side. We're talking fencing, we're talking temporary things don't seem to be a problem. But anything permanent, I'm hesitant to say, well, are we going to get stopped because they don't like the contract for the irrigation vendor? Or they don't like the contract for, there's some risk there. And I think it can possibly be solved with Jake and the city attorney getting some kind of agreement that it's not, we're not held up every time they're trying to do something. It's
right. What I was saying though is that, like you say, just forget it. Let's just leave it.
Oh, yeah, priority. Yes.
Please. We have already invested a lot of taxpayer dollars in this design. And I think it's a good design. We've all voted on it. We all approved it. Let's not throw in the towel yet until Brianne has brought the subject back up and we have an answer from the city, a definite no or a definite yes. But rather than to say, hey, you guys take it over. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our community because we did take on this project initially. We were asked to take it on, we all voted, and we all said yes.
Madam Chair, I agree with you in the concept of we should finish that part out. We need to have that conversation. But I also just kind of highlight that they need to be a willing partner on the thing or it isn't going to work. So we need to have that conversation. If we're going to go forward and do this, let's do it. But it is tighter. And so as we got into, and I know later in the agenda, we're talking about improvements and things, and it brings the question, is that just money wasted because we're trying to move forward? Okay, and so I'm giving, you're right, this is a different option. If you don't, it's a kind of, if you either hear something back from the city that they let us go forward with it, and then we start like we're talking, do the golf course. But if we can't get an answer, how long are we going to wait? I was up there at that meeting, a year ago. This could go on for another 2 years. Honestly, look what happened to the Wildflower. They have been readjusting it. So
let's let Brianne pose the question, and let's see what they come back with. and then we can revisit this, rather than to get the rumor out there that we're throwing in the towel. I don't want the public to think that we
I
are
am not
giving-
throwing in the, yeah, but let me be clear. I'm not throwing in the towel. I'm saying we're going to focus on the things that we have ownership over and that we can control. And when they see that those things are done, then there's going to be pressure to get the other side done. And they can aptly share some of that $67 million that they close on. If they want to speed the west side up, they're in better position than we are. So we can't work on something that we don't have title to. So my focus is shift gears, focus on the east side. And yes, I do want to make changes to the Fazio plan. I want to have a walking trail around that place, and I want to make it more friendly. So, and that was, I was told couldn't be done. And I think this is the point where I don't want to go with that. I want to have I want to listen to our needs assessment, what residents are saying, incorporate that in those two areas, incorporate the lighting in those areas. And I also want to go to a design build concept so it gets done quickly and someone else is at risk with it, not us just paying an hourly bill.
Well,
I have a question about the design build thing though. I don't know much about it either, but can you, I mean, we've already gotten the design. Can you go back and do a design build? I don't think you can. Yeah, you'd have to start all over.
Yeah, Madam Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Rollins.
I think we're getting ahead of our skis here. First of all, I've been hearing now for months that the sale of the golf course is in trouble for really one reason is if Lennar had been able to get the density that they wanted on this property, I think they'd already closed on this property. So I think there's two things going here. They're concerned about the money that they're paying for the density that they're going to get. And I do believe that if we move ahead with the east side and then the city elects or GL decides to walk away, we're in a really awkward position because now we've got a golf course and a driving range out west that the city still maintains. I think we need to know what's happening with that deal because it's been silent. I haven't heard anything publicly mentioned at any city council meeting where we are with that. And I think that we need to find out that answer. And I think we need to speak to the city and get the approval of our plan. Our plan for the west side. We decided on a phased-in plan, and everybody voted in to support that for the west side. And I would certainly like to do that, but I really want to know what the deal is with GL Homes and the city. I mean, when is the contract up that they have to sign it or walk away? And then getting to the issue with design build, I thought that you bid a project for a design build. You selected a contractor who did the design and the construction. And once we get the approval for this project, if we can get the approval, we start making changes to it. Now we got to get more approvals from the city. And I think that, and I think I like the idea of walking trails, but every golf course that I've ever played doesn't allow pedestrians out on the golf course. And there's a specific reason for it. It's the liability that we've been so concerned about with other projects. So I think we need to just take it one step at a time, get the approval from the city or find out why we can't get it. They've had this design for many months. Craig has spoken to it. Rick Hurd's spoken to it. I don't know why, and I haven't really come back. We've gotten the price down to where they wanted to it. We've given them our phased-in project. You know, what's the holdup? I think they owe an explanation to us and to the public and the golfers as to why we can't get this approved. I don't mind developing the east side, but I would sure want to be comfortable that the golf course, Boca Muni, is going to be sold. But I still would like to stick to our first plan that was a phased-in plan to get the golf course up and running in, was it 3 to 4 years? And I think the golfers would probably appreciate that too. But we need to know what the city's doing with our design. We need to know what's going on with Boca Muni and the sale, and then we can make some decisions of what we want to do.
Yeah, I would agree with Commissioner Rollins. We can't put the cart before the horse. We need to know what the city is doing. And that extra axe in the fence post, so to speak, of the sale of Boca Muni not being, still being up in the air, that's an issue. Because if GL walks away from it, then what does the city do with that land? Are they going to be disposed toward building yet another golf course? So that's going to have an impact on the decision they make. And if, and again, you have to forgive me, I'm getting a little ahead of us here, but if they decide against it, what happens to the west side of the golf course? We're paying it off and eventually it will be all ours. But that's what, maybe 12, 13 years in the future. And we just can't let everything just sit there for another 12 or 13 years. We've already let it sit, in my estimation, we've let it sit too long. So we need to get some answers from the city and then we can proceed. And as far as the walking paths go, yeah, it's a nice idea, but would it set us back further? And the point that Commissioner Rollins brought up about the prohibition on pedestrians on a golf course also comes into play.
Thank you, Mr. Engel.
Let's see if we can get the approval and get the motion passed to send Brianne over to the city, because I think that's the first step we need to engage in. And then we can discuss other options once we've had some serious conversation with council and the city manager, perhaps.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Ernst.
Commissioner Rollins is always the voice of reason. So I will defer to Commissioner Rollins. I agree with what he's saying to get the answer and we will come back and we'll make the decision on it. I'm not as tied to what happens out at the golf course. All things I've heard from different elected people, there is no reason that the golf course will not be sold. It is on track out west to be sold. So I think it is, and they should be on board with, if they want to have golf in Boca, supporting the development of a golf course on the east and the west. But we simply, I just caution it sometimes things take too long, and if we can start with things that we have and own, that's a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Ernst. We do have a motion that has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Or Commissioner Ernst?
Could you read the motion just to be sure I understand the motion? We had a little bit of discussion there.
Yes, it was to direct Brianne to go to the city council for a timeline and approval of the design for the golf course construction project.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. You have another job, Brianne. Okay. As far as the CIP projects, I just have a question for Melissa about the locker room flooring. Have there been any complaints about that since you did the hallways? And do you think it's absolutely necessary to do that at the Swim and Racket Club? Melissa?
Okay, you got me now?
Ah, gotcha.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
There have been complaints for the locker rooms, or some concerns expressed for in the locker rooms only. So the treatment that we did in the other areas has been fine. It's those higher traffic areas in the locker room where there's more of the water that accumulates.
Okay. And the geothermal system?
I'm sorry, Susie, we can probably, on that price tag, I put a 20,000 holder in there, but I've gotten some quotes since then that are closer to around 13.
Okay, that's good. I can paint.
Non-style.
The geothermal system, would you explain that to the public, please?
Yes, the geothermal system is the heating system in the pool. And I have it here in front of me, but I will get it and send it to you guys. The number of times that we're calling them out to repair that system is going up excessively. And when that system fails, depending on the time of year, but if it fails during a certain time, then the pool becomes I wouldn't say unswimmable because you got your people that enjoy cold water, but it takes it awful. But what I will send to you, because before I put that on there is I talked to the current people that come out, Symbiotech, I believe is their name, that comes out and works on the pool geothermal systems right now. And the amount of times they've had to come out has gradually increased. And it's a good number. I want to say it might've been 12 times this past year.
Wow.
Once a month that they were having to come out to repair it.
Is this the same company that the city uses for Meadows Park Pool?
Yes. Hold on. Let me say I'm not sure on that because I'm not sure they have the same heating system. I know the city is, I know the city is the one that utilized this company to hire them to do our pool for the maintenance for it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Melissa. Is there any more discussion on the CIP timeline and costs? And Brianne will have the budget on Monday so that we can continue this discussion. The number 3, the beautification of the golf course. I spoke to our landscaper that we had do a design out there, and she said that Mrs. Wright's ideas for xeriscape were very good. It would still require some watering in for a period of time, and that would be accomplished probably by either trucking the water in, or if we could figure out some way to get water. She had some very good suggestions, but I'm going to let Brianne speak to some of her ideas. Brianne, would you?
These were ideas that Melissa put together, and she included in her note here the 4 different options that she has, and then also just a consideration at the end that we go out for a design build. And I thought I was muted for a second. That we go out for a design build for those 3 corners just to get some xeriscaping ideas from companies.
Mrs. Wright?
Yeah, so another thing I wanted to add to Brianne's plate, because you don't have enough, is another RFP for a design build for those 3 corners. So I was thinking of doing kind of like a tiered request from the designers, saying, I don't know what numbers make sense to you guys, but I was thinking 10,000 for each corner, 20,000 for each corner, and 30,000 for each corner, and say, what can you do for these amounts of money on these corners to kind of make it look cohesive in terms of just open space, pedestrian type, areas that people can use, but that can be blended into the golf course design once we get there. And then the other thing that Brianne and I had discussed was that parking lot and the 2 tennis courts that are there, to possibly not include this in the RFP, but taking those out and then include it in the RFP, but not include the demolition of those in the RFP cost, if you know what I'm saying.
Well, Wayne wanted to keep that surface for the equipment for the golf course construction. So we wouldn't want to get rid of that. Steve?
No, I wasn't saying anything. I don't even know how.
Oh, it just lit up.
It just lit up. Just my positive attitude and my personal energy just did it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did speak to Wayne, and on these 3 corners with the beautification and anything we do, a lot of the things can be used in the golf course. Like let's say we plant shrubs or different things that don't require a lot of maintenance. Those things can all be incorporated later on in the course, even if they have to be moved around.
Mr. Rollins?
Yeah, just a question regarding, I like the idea of cleaning up those areas. As far as the way it's set up now, we have the perimeter fixed so that it's a little more difficult from those 4 corners to get on the golf course. But I mean, there are ways ATVs between this association, between the buildings, I think are able to get on the golf course. And if we take down those wind barriers or the fences that we have now and make it more attractive, I think we need to keep into consideration about how we're going to protect prevent unauthorized access to the golf course itself. With if you're going to put a hurricane fence, or you can maybe even use shrubbery to prevent access to that property. Like on the southeast corner where that is now, that's protected because there's a fence that goes on 2nd Avenue around the Clintmore Road and then back, so that that area is totally secure, somewhat, to vehicles. And before we put the last section of fence in there where the power lines went through, that was an access point where people were running ATVs and trail bikes through there. And I think whatever we do, we need to take into consideration the cost to provide a little bit of a barrier there from access to the golf course and other vehicles, so that people don't have to keep calling the police about folks running up and down there on our property.
Okay.
Well, maybe that's something we can include in the RFP as well.
I would think so, Aaron. We should do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, would you like to make the motion?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I wanted to have just a little bit of discussion on numbers in terms of what everybody thought about that, in terms of, seeing if that's a good price, you think, to beautify those corners and to see what they can do at those different levels of cost.
Brianne, is
Do
that
those numbers sound good to you guys, or?
Sure. I mean, I think we'll see, the idea is to minimal landscaping is what you're looking for, right? Because they are low numbers. And if we're going to do anything on the side where we demo I guess we're not going to demo that, but maybe there is somebody out there that can do something with that parking lot to make it look even better. I mean, even if they just painted it and put like an obstacle course for kids that live over there to do, I don't know, but like a lined obstacle course, not elements, but just on the ground. Just
right.
Thinking.
But we need city approval before we do the RFP.
For that side, yes. We need to let them know what we're doing. Like when we wanted to do the pickleball, they were amenable to those things. When we needed to put the fence up, they were amenable to those things. So I guess we could put the RFP together and show them and see if they're good to go with that.
I don't see why they would be, they wouldn't think this is a good idea to make this area look better.
It needs it.
It does.
And I especially like the fact that Wayne said that some of those elements, would not be like we would put them in there and then destroy them in 2 or 3 years. If it was set up in such a fashion that we could continue to use those, whatever improvement we made, I think I'd feel a lot better about spending that money. And so, I like Aaron's idea of getting, options on different levels of pricing, whatever that seems reasonable to the commission. But rather than just, if we give one flat number, we're really opening up the door for somebody to be real creative, and it could be a very expensive project. But if you broke it down into segments, like I want to see what we can do at 10,000 per corner and maybe 20,000 per corner. I think that would be an appropriate way to go.
If you want to.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
Hey, go for it.
Make a motion to do a design build RFP for the 3 corners of intersection of Clintmore Road and 2nd Avenue to see what ideas we get back, to do 10,000 for each corner, 20,000 and 30,000 for each corner. And then hopefully you can get that out as soon as we'll see it as soon as possible, and we can get it out and approved by the city.
Second the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Yes.
Sorry,
Rita.
just to be clear on the elements that you're talking, minimal xeriscaping, not a lot of maintenance, very low key elements.
Yep. People be able to walk somewhere, spend some time, go home, whatever.
Okay.
Maybe even let dogs go there. Yeah. Craig?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsay?
Yes.
Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay. The last item on the regular business is the banking RFP. Brianne?
Yes.
this is going back a lifetime ago. In October, we put out an RFP for banking services. We did get 3 RFPs back. Everybody was responsive. All were very good companies. I think at this point, just in light of everything that we are going through and all the changes that are happening, and obviously I have a very full plate right now, I'm just going to recommend that we stick with our current bank, which is Northern Trust. That's my recommendation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Commissioners?
I'm good with Northern Trust. Nobody's tried to run away with our money yet.
They're very responsive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Jacob, do we need a motion?
I would like a motion, Madam Chair, and if I could ask that that motion include a rejection of all of the bids that were submitted pursuant to the RFP, just to close the procurement loop, and then to move forward with Northern Trust.
Okay, Commissioners, could I get a motion, please?
I'll
Not
make
yet.
the motion. So I make the motion to close the RFP, reject all the bidders who are there. We will proceed with our current banking relationship with Northern Trust.
Thank you. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. White. Okay. Any further discussion, Commissioners? Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mr. Ernst, it's your time. Page 33 of your agenda packet for the approval of the invoices. You're muted, Craig. There you go.
There we go. Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for approval of the invoices for a total of $67,802.43.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Discussion, Commissioners? Hearing none. Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
So Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's time for reports and discussions from the Executive Director, Ms. Harms.
Okay, a couple years ago, I'm not sure if everybody remembers, when we were building the Swim and Racket Center, we had the local HOA come to us and talk about putting a pedestrian gate on the sidewalk that goes into the coach houses. The president of the HOA at Wimbledon has wanted to revisit that subject. In the past, they were looking at a $12,000 gate with electronic access, which means they'd have to pull electricity off the light pole that's there. There would be questions about maintenance and who's going to repair it and those kinds of things. So he asked that I bring this up again to see if there's any interest in us seeing if there's some way we can all work together to get something in place to prevent. They're having issues with people riding motorcycles down that sidewalk and accessing their vehicles and homes in that area, that people that don't live in that area. They're gated communities otherwise, except for this pedestrian access point. So if there's an interest, I can come back and we could get some updated prices, and I'll talk to the HOA about any kind of cost sharing that they're interested in doing, and we can come back and revisit it.
I'm definitely interested. I'd
Okay.
like to see what can be worked out. I think it would benefit us as well, because if they're riding motorcycles through there, they're riding motorcycles through our property as well.
I'd like to see something, though, that is not quite as costly, and there are other ways of gating with a lock of some kind, rather than to have electricity and maintenance. I do feel that if we have a gate, it should have a lock of some kind, but definitely $12,000 seems, and that was a couple of years ago, that seems
Right.
a little bit high for a gate.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, we'll discuss some options.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that, you know, the gate could probably be fixed with some kind of a manual lock like you see on a realtor, where you have you punch in a code to get through there, and you could change that code periodically. But I don't think we need to put something down there where it's going to require electricity and run up the expense of it. But we do need to, I think we do have an obligation to prevent, unauthorized access across our property into theirs.
Okay, so we'll come back with that.
Madam Chair, or Brianne, one of the other options to consider is, I recall that conversation, and a year later, I did talk with our maintenance person who was out at the field. And he had a good suggestion. I think just ask our staff. And he said, you know, those cylinders, those giant pipes that they put in the ground that are
They did that, and they're still
sleeved,
getting back there. Yeah.
they're still getting back there. They did
Yes.
do it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, don't listen to the homeowners association. They know what they're doing. Give them gates.
Okay. Last week we had another follow-up meeting with the needs assessment group, with Michael and Michelle, myself, and the group to go over the needs assessment, because that is something that was intended to be finalized by now and have a joint meeting with you and council. So we're working on just finishing that report. It was obviously delayed by some of the closures and the things that have been happening, but it is close to coming out, and then we'll have to look at, as things progress, how we can all meet to review that information and get it out to the public too. The pipes and pumping project went out to bid, and they're expecting those bids back in July. We're waiting to get a copy of those bid specs. We have not received them yet, but we did request them from the city just so we can also see them ahead of time, and we'll have a look at them. I spoke with the director of the Friends, John Holloway. We're still waiting to get the executed MOU back from them, but he's reviewing it and should get it back to us hopefully this week. We have a conference call scheduled tomorrow at 1 o'clock with the city to discuss the timeline of the project. So hopefully we'll have some updates on where that design is, and probably I'm hoping to get a project schedule from the project manager, and we'll have a better idea of when we can expect to be seeing the tower finished. Word is, and Jake can chime in here, virtual meetings are expected to end at the end of June. So we'll likely have to go back to live meetings in July. Is that right, Jake?
As of now, that is correct.
Not that we're not all alive right now, but I mean alive in-person meetings. So we're going to set up some meetings with the city staff at the theater, and we'll look at a plan for that and get ready for July, going back to meeting in person. And then we have the Fieldhouse Bleachers project that's been going on while the facility has been closed. That's expected to be done by July 17th. So just a quick update on that. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Brianne. That was very good. District Council, Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one just quick item to ask the board. You may recall last month, the board approved a declaration of restrictive covenants for Ocean Strand regarding some future uses of that property. We've been working quite diligently to find a legal description of the property to attach to the declaration so that it can be recorded. Unfortunately, the deeds that we have, both the ones in the file the district had and the versions that we saw in the public records in Palm Beach County, are both watermarked and not certified copies. We did speak to Mr. Koski just to inquire as to whether he had a copy of the legal description in his office. Thus far, we've been unable to locate a certified legal description to attach to the declaration. We know that the district has a relationship with Calvin Giordano, who's done some surveying work for us over the years. We reached out to Calvin to inquire as to what it would cost to get a clean certified legal of that parcel. They've quoted us an estimate of under $1,000 to be about $950 to go through the survey and legal process to get those certified copies. I'm just asking the board's permission if we can engage them for that purpose so we can go ahead and finalize the declaration and get that recorded.
Do we need a motion for that, Mr. Horowitz?
I would like a motion, yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Could I get a motion, please?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we engage Gavin Giordano to do a survey of the property so we can get a clean and proper deed.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Engel seconded. Discussion? Joanne, please do a roll call vote.
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. It's expected that'll take
Yes.
less than a week to complete. As soon as it's finalized, we'll go ahead and record the declaration to wrap that up. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. Commissioners, Mr. Rollins, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, I'd just like to, say to Craig, I think he had some good highlights there that he was recommending us to consider. And the needs assessment, I think, will point out some things that, we'll need to do. And I like the ideas of the walking paths. Didn't mean to speak against that on the golf course but I think it is a safety issue. But I think that is something that certainly we could highlight. I I did make a brief comment about the recent and the quick indemnification and hold harmless agreement that the city put out there. I think that I don't think that there's probably a proper public notice, and getting this out is almost like it was just like we better hurry up and get this out before we have a problem with the COVID-19. And as the attorney spoke to earlier on Saber's behalf, and in the insurance business, I've witnessed a lot of changes that have taken place with liability coverage over the years. And anytime I see an indemnification that says covering any and all claims, it gives me a shiver, because there's not an insurance general liability policy that will cover any and all claims, but that's going to be in every hold harmless agreement that we see, which puts the sports groups at risk to some degree. But over the years, and I've been involved with youth sports in town for, 35 years, and we've really, up until this point, never had a problem. But I think, as someone said earlier in the meeting, these are different days and different times. The concern I have with the indemnification agreements is, I think that we need to look at it from a global standpoint, make a policy decision about having this, and then a policy decision as to who is going to actually have to sign off on these indemnity agreements. I think, groups that use our facilities certainly should have to sign this when they get a permit. And then the issue with the COVID-19 and being responsible for that, even the Congress has not decided how they want to handle civil liabilities. And you can be guaranteed that there's going to be litigation with this, no disrespect to the legal field, but attorneys have a way of finding something that may turn out to be a profitable venture, and bringing litigation for someone who is allegedly contracted COVID at some place of business could be a problem. And I think Congress has wrestled with that and tried to put some type of estoppel in the next funding source, saying that unless you, if you follow the CDC guidelines, then you would not be civilly responsible for someone that allegedly contracted COVID at your place of business. If in fact they could prove that they did, you'd still gonna have to prove that they didn't and incur some legal expenses. So if we can work out an agreement between the parties that were to be indemnified, to let I mean, we're, as the gentleman said, we're, a public-private partnership, and I'm sorry to take up so much airtime, but I think it's important, because this is it's an agreement that should not be signed lightly by the sports groups. They should understand what they're signing when they do, and I think it should be such that it doesn't hang them up by their thumbs and put them out of business should something like this, some litigation occur. And to this stage, and I've been here since '77, I've not seen any such activity that would have fallen through the insurance and would have created a problem for any of the placeholders on these certificates of insurance, on these hold harmless agreements. So I just am saying this because I want to be respectful to the groups that use our facilities. They are doing us a favor by hosting these youth sports groups, whether it's Boca Hoops, Saber, Boca Jets Lacrosse. There'd be no way that any municipality could support these kind of groups without the volunteers and the sponsor dollars that they bring to help support the cost to keep the registration fees down. So speaking on behalf of all sports groups, let's be careful with whatever we roll out, and let's take this back to the city with a message that we need to have a little more discussion on that hold harmless agreement. And sorry to take up all this time, but I thought it was important to address that.
Well said, Mr. Rollins. Do you have anything else you'd like to share?
No, ma'am. I just have enjoyed the conversation tonight. I thought we've done a nice job with addressing the future budget needs, and it's going to be tight. And whether we go to roll back or maintain the same millage fee, I think our constituents are expecting us to run a tight ship in the future, as we always try to do.
Absolutely. Mr. Engel?
Yes, ma'am. In light of the fact that meetings conducted in the manner we're conducting them will end with the end of this month, I think it'd be a good time to approach the city with a view toward holding a joint meeting and figuring out what that will look like. We've got a ton of stuff on our mutual plate and a ton of stuff that needs to be decided. And we got to figure out a way to move forward. So I would like to, you know, if Brianna, you know, just one more thing and hope it's not the straw that breaks the camel's back. If you could get in touch with the powers that be over on city staff and talk to them, you know, have an initial exploration concerning a joint meeting, maybe to be held this summer.
Okay.
You know, that would be very nice. I'd also like to say, you know, I thought tonight was very productive. We talked about a lot of different things. And I think we got some stuff done. And that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Mr. Ernst, you're muted.
I'm sure, there we go. Sorry. I press the mute button and sometimes it doesn't unmute. Look, I second Mr. Rollins' comments on the litigation and the legal indemnification. There in the FAU agreement specifically, there are 3 primary beneficiaries. The 2 beneficiaries, one is Sabre. You know, they get a, you know, pretty much an exclusive field, although it is open for everyone, but they are the ones who are really using it. The second beneficiary is FAU, and it's their staff and coaches that are helping out on Sabre who are doing things. And the third are district residents, you know, and our family has benefited from the FAU Glades Fields for the last 20 years we've lived in Boca. So I would not want to see any of that go at all. And I'm concerned about the new additional language that is brought out by COVID-19. That raises another thing. By any means, we do not want to put these nonprofit businesses out of business or anything. But at the same token, we entered an agreement with FAU, and maybe it was FAU who went overboard. We are a taxing authority. We have nothing to do with being out on those fields other than paying the almost $3 million over the next 10 years. And I'm happy to pay that for any volunteer group that wants to do those kind of things for the community. And it is really a blessed and vigilant volunteer crowd that run our youth sports, and we need to support them. So, you know, I think we can work something out. I think it does. I didn't think about it at the time that it brought a bigger issue into play of what about the other leagues, what's going on. And then the whole COVID-19 thing, you know, a conversation should really be driven by our legal counsel. So I'd like to not play attorney. I'd like to let them do their job, protect our interest. At the same token, this district is just a taxing authority. We are not here to assume the risk or liability of something that tragic could happen. And so I expect that the city agreements will protect us, and maybe that's good enough. And then if there's something in the FAU agreement that is putting too unfair burden on them, we'll go back to FAU and we'll tell them, hey, look, we'll work it. But our goal is to try to make it easy for everyone to run, not to make it difficult. And if a little bit more information, I think we'll get this thing buttoned up and we'll be done with it.
Madam Chairman, can I say one thing to Craig? There was really nothing that I saw in the FAU agreement that was, you know, created a problem for us in getting this contract together. It's pretty close to what we had originally on Henderson and the Glades Roads field before. I don't think that they're the issue. I mean, there's some other issues dealing with safety that was even addressed by these hold harmless agreements. But I think in the risk transfer, you want to transfer the risk to someone, and that's what these hold harmless agreements are doing. And bear in mind that we do have sovereign immunity, but with the placeholders, whether it's Sabre or any other youth sports groups, Boca Jets, they all have insurance, which would be the first call. But as I said, there's no all-risk liability insurance policies that's going to cover any and all risk. It's going to be your belt and suspenders, and it's going to give you good protection. And I haven't seen any weird claims that would have gone beyond our insurance coverages that the youth sports programs carry, and I'm sure a number of different sports programs. But I think that if we can take a more global look at this hold harmless agreement and try to give the youth sports groups a little more protection, that would be an appropriate thing to do.
I agree.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Mr. Ernst? Mrs. Wright?
I have nothing except for I 1000% agree with what Bob said, and he always words everything so well, so much better than I could ever. So yes, agree with that. And that's it.
Okay. I do have a few little things. I have a question for Melissa. Do we have clearance in the right of way for the golf course? I know that was a problem, that there were some vehicles there. You're muted, Brianne.
Yeah, when I drove by there today, he had a vehicle parked in there. It was a vehicle that he uses and drives around. I have talked to city code enforcement. They're driving by periodically and checking for me. But is that driveway consistently open with nothing in it? No. Can you consistently drive in and drive past it? Yes. The property he has on there is in the right of way. It's not on our property.
Okay, thank you. I did ask Mr. Horowitz about the document that he sent to the Attorney General about the convey issue, and it is still in the queue. So I've had some inquiries from the public, and I just wanted them to know that we haven't forgotten that. I have a question for Brianne and Melissa. The sunscreen dispensers, are those motion detected, or are those, do you have to press a button on those? You're muted.
Okay. You know what? Honestly, Susie, I don't remember. I was over there the day they put them up, and I put my hands under there and used it. I want to say they're automatic, but I'm not 100% positive on that.
I'm just concerned about disinfecting, if they're regularly disinfected, if they are not motion detected. So if you would look into that, Melissa, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will just real quick so that you guys know, we did only a week before last. The reason why we don't have the other two sunscreen dispensers right now is out of our hands. There's a changeover at the Melanoma Foundation, and Lauren is having to go back and prove to them that she has paid for the other three. So I am simply waiting on them to work that out in order for us to get the other three delivered. I've told them that we're ready to take delivery and ready to put them in place whenever they have them.
Thank you. That's great. It was brought up to me that the staff doesn't have anything about performance reviews in place. Jacob, do we need some kind of policy about that? So whoever does the performance review has someone in the meeting with staff, or how is that usually handled with other municipalities?
Yeah, the answer is it depends. Typically, it's a function of the HR or personnel department. We're obviously a very small operation. We don't have the full scope and breadth. The only direct report, well, I should say, this board has two direct reports. You have your executive director and you have your general counsel. The other two staff members theoretically report to your executive director. So the process, and if I'm not mistaken, I actually think that Ms. Harm's agreement provides for an annual review. I'd have to check on that, but I do seem to recall that provision in there. There's not a mechanism or a process or a form that would provide for that review, though we could certainly create one, and there are out there. A lot of that would fall under a personnel manual. I know we've talked about having a personnel manual over the years to memorialize some of those things. But if the board wants to discuss some process to review those employees that do report to the board, we can certainly have that discussion. But again, there are some options and some resources we can share which may provide some kind of model or some kind of assistance with that process.
Thank you.
One question.
Yes.
I thought, so I'm confused because Jacob said that the 2 employees report to Brianne, but is that how it's laid out? Because I think the employees report directly to us. Am I right?
I'll reconfirm that if I'm mistaken. Again, and Brianne can correct me if I'm wrong. I was under the impression that the general counsel and the executive director report to the board, with the other employees reporting to the executive director.
It was never clarified, and a lot of the employee manual itself uses the term district and then uses the term executive director. And for a lot of the employee stuff, it's left up to the district. It's not said, like any kind of employee issues or things like that are left up to the district to decide. So it's not really clear. And the employee manual talks about an evaluation process, but we've never adopted one. We don't have a lot of the things that the employee handbook covers. There's no actual written policies that kind of go over the step-by-step of it.
I mean, ultimately, the board controls the process for reviewing its employees. So that this may be an item for a future agenda to discuss how the board wants to go about implementing that process.
I think that's a good idea. It would just, yes, Erin.
I was just going to say, yeah, I think that needs to be laid out clearly. And I also think, though, that it also needs to be clear to the employees and to Brianne and to us who we are directing to do things and who is ultimately on a day-to-day, if there's issues and things like that, who ultimately has, not control, I don't know the word to use, but do you know what I mean? Who's kind of overseeing, And if there's an issue with an employee, I think Brianne or an executive director, whoever the executive director is, has to be able to deal with the issues on a day-to-day basis without having to come to us during a public meeting to discuss employee issues, which I don't think necessarily need to be brought up in a public discussion sometimes. So I think that's something that I think Brianne needs to have authority to be able to deal with things like that.
So can we work with legal or myself work with legal to develop policies and come back, not at the June 15th meeting, because my plate is full right now for that meeting, but maybe a meeting in July or August to go over to start talking about those things? Is that?
Sounds like a plan. I just think it's a good thing just to see what everybody's progress is and if
agreed.
This is not directed at anyone. It's just something that I just thought might need to be put in place.
Yeah, I think it should be, made clear that, by nature of the title, the executive director is the person that has is the titular head for the organization, for the employees, and any direction to employees should probably come through Brianne as the executive director, so that I'm not calling up Joanne and asking her to do something or sending Melissa on an errand. That kind of the organization should be managed and directed by the executive director.
It's not, Madam Chair, if I may, just very briefly.
Please.
It's not in our charter. Many special district charters and just about every municipal charter has what's called a non-interference provision, which essentially tells the elected body that its direct line of communication is with the executive director, with the city manager, or with those charter officers who report to the elected body, the city attorney. Sometimes it's the finance director, sometimes it's the city clerk. But all other direction, all other employees run through the executive director or the city manager, and the other employees work for that individual. So there's essentially a separation between the policymakers, the elected officials, and staff. And we're a bit unique in that we're really a very small operation of 3 employees. So it's a little different, but the concept that Commissioner Rollins is describing, where elected officials, board members are not giving direction to employees with the exception of the manager or the executive director, is a very common practice in this type of operation, type of agency.
I like that concept as well. Okay, good. Well, that's, oh, the, Brianne, the CRA hearing, did that ever,
We just, Jacob and I have to finish, Merv got it back to all the numbers and we got the city's final report that came out at the end of May. So I guess it was actually in April, the months run together, but we just need to submit our final application. And Jacob and I, we had one meeting, but I think we had so many other things that came up, we didn't ever get to finish that topic. So we'll finish that next week and
Correct.
get it done.
thank you. Okay. Future agenda items, of course, are the budget, the gate will be addressed next to the swim and racket, and the Ocean Strand RFP. And hopefully maybe you'll have some information about a joint meeting, if not the first one in July, please.
Can we do the gate for the Swim and Racket Center gate, just because we want to research some options? Can we do that for, instead of Monday, the first meeting in July?
First in July would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, anything else you'd like to see on a future agenda item? Okay.
In that case, move to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Joanne, would you please do a roll call, please?
All right, just unmute it. Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes?
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsay,
Yes.
Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Meeting adjourned. Everybody stay safe, please. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.